You're listening to Literacies, conversations about literacy that can change your life. In this 4-part series, we're talking to experts about why media, data, information, and financial literacies are critical skill sets for modern life. We'll give you a quick dive into what it means, how it impacts you, and things you can do to skill up. This episode is all about information literacy. To talk about information literacy, I'm joined by two guests, Victoria Elmwood and David Rodriguez.
Right. Hi, I'm Victoria Elmwood. I'm the Scholarly Engagement Librarian for the Humanities here.
Hi, I'm Professor David Rodriguez. I'm a visiting assistant professor in the Department of English who typically teaches English 1010, our freshman composition course here at Tulane.
Okay, thank y'all for being here today. And let's just jump in with our very first question. What is information literacy?
I think probably the easiest way to explain it quickly is to say that information literacy is the ability to find, evaluate, and use information, right? And so it really is all about the whole gamut of the process of not only knowing when you need information, but going all the way to the back end of using information, recording how you've used something, and even saving information. So it spans kind of a big spectrum, but each action has its own sort of challenges that come with it. So I think the find part of information literacy, I think, has gotten a lot easier because Google. I think digitization and the internet has made it a lot easier to find things. But the problem with that is that there's so many more things to find now. That kind of leads us to the next problem of evaluating information. And I think this is probably one of the things that we spend the most time on, is trying to teach students what's good information, what's not so great information, and what's really bad information. And then using information, I think, sort of grows out of the evaluation piece. But it also asks the user to think about what their information needs are.
As expected, Dr. Elmwood has hit the nail on the head. So what I can offer here is on that issue of using and finding and evaluating sources, where do students typically struggle with? Even if you funnel students' requirements down to a library database source, as Victoria said, one of the principal focuses they might have is just hitting a number of sources that they gotta meet for the assignment. And so you try and fight against that as a teacher by emphasizing pre-research, learning about the scholarship and the conversation, importantly, the conversation around the topic, and then finding your way into that conversation on the basis of kind of a cursory knowledge, at the very least, of what you're writing about. So long story short, we really have to kind of start from the beginning. What is information literacy? How is it enacted? And then how can you purposefully and meaningfully and usefully and valuably instill all of those skills into the actual output you're doing as a student? And it's very difficult. It's a tough ask when somebody's also adjusting to all of the other new experiences of college.
I also love that Dave picks up on the idea of growth and change, because I think it takes students a little bit longer to realize that it's okay that as you learn more information about your topic, your ideas should change, right? Like what you think you're going to say at the beginning of a paper should change by the time you get to the point where you're drafting it, because that's the point of looking for information, is becoming more informed about whatever question or topic you're most interested in.
If you wanted to expand beyond just the research paper, what would you say is the reason why information literacy is important for students?
I don't think it's alarmist to say that we need information at all times in order to act responsibly, but above that level of things, to live an educated life dedicated to lifelong learning, to set appropriate goals for yourself, to understand what opportunities are available and how to responsibly pursue those things. Those things are tied to information literacy. And then above all else, the truth is tied to information literacy. So understanding what is actually happening amidst complex data sets in the world around you, which are constantly evolving, downflows to all the things, happiness and living a balanced life and so on and so forth, but also has to do with the health of a nation, your ability to vote for someone knowing what they've actually done and not just what they said, and what they stand for, not just what they tell you they stand for, is likewise tied to information literacy. So it's a daily practice skill that requires active engagement with the world around you. And that is a very big ask for an 18-year-old coming into college for the first time. But it is the truth of life, unless the internet goes away and life fundamentally shifts, but we don't expect that to happen.
Victoria, what would you say?
I guess, why should we care? Picking up on what Dave was saying about being able to check facts. When we go to a website, sometimes it's hard even for trained professionals to necessarily know exactly what it is they're looking at. And so a lot of times you run into folks who are reading an opinion piece as though it's factual. Being able to teach people to distinguish between those two things is really important, because you run into so many different types of documents or graphics online. It really is important to know how you as a reader should be using this, should be taking this. And I think also understanding the source of information, and also understanding that there are people out there with agendas. Everyone has bias, right? That's just a fact of life. That's a fact of having a brain and living in this world. But I think being able to distinguish between bias and agenda, and that might be behind a piece, I think that is a particularly useful thing to worry about. And then again, to go back, to why we care, an example I use sometimes is grain-free dog food. Is grain-free dog food actually good for dogs, or does it cause problems? Have we seen some kind of cases that are cropping up? And so again, right, that's where having information literacy skills, maybe that you build in an academic context, is great, because you can bring them back to a personal context. Because again, the stakes are really high when we get to personal contexts a lot, in ways that are maybe less immediate to us in an academic context.
Yeah, it's very true. How should students skill up to learn these things, to learn this skill? Besides taking English 1010, in addition to taking English 1010. That's a great
start with Professor Rodriguez, or whoever. We have wonderful faculty. It's a difficult question to answer. Part of the frustration is that this is a life skill. And it takes a lot of practice, and that practice has to be engaged probably every single day for all the reasons we just laid out, because life situations on a daily basis depend on your information literacy. It starts with becoming aware of what information literacy is, and then it probably moves into what's a basic process, what are a set of questions by which you can ask who is writing this source, what are not only their biases, but also their agendas, as Dr. Elmwood pointed out. What is the purpose, in other words, of this thing being there? How much do I know about this subject? How much don't I know about this subject? And therefore, how might I reasonably fact check this thing before using it for whatever that intended purpose is? And by the time you weed whack your way through all of that, you don't end up with, so here's the one website you go to. It's entirely context dependent. What am I trying to do? Where am I getting the information from? And what are the responsible steps I might take to deal with that? But beyond that, you got to practice. And so there are websites you can go to where you can practice. Sometimes in 1010, we look at a website called Spot the Troll, where it gives you a bunch of different social media profiles and says, is this a bot or not? And there is an overconfidence problem in the classroom early on, and there is an underconfidence problem in the class by the end of it all, because it's difficult. But you do learn through just checking yourself on your own overconfidence. You do learn, all right, so what am I supposed to be paying attention to? The connection that can be drawn between information literacy and a lifespan. And by the way, at Tulane, our mission statement ties the idea of research to living a life of integrity. The connection that can be drawn from one to the other is that you can end up in a state of confusion, exhaustion, rage, whatever else might come out of that because you lack a skill set that's necessary to life in the 21st century. And it's about patience probably more than anything else. Just slow down. Don't immediately type a reaction. Don't be provoked by the things that exist to provoke you. It's a daily practice of active engagement rather than a passive acceptance of just the information that is supplied to you.
I want to kind of pick up on what Dave was saying about the emotionality. The emotionality of research and taking in information is something we don't think about a lot because we think of information as a very dispassionate thing, as something that's not necessarily something that we can get up in arms about. But I think being able to reserve judgment, being able to restrain your impulse to click, right? So I think another thing that's difficult is not only are our emotions being played on, but we're being distracted in a lot of ways. And I don't know if anyone has noticed their attention span changing or felt like their attention span has been changing. It's another thing that's sort of a problem in a world where we feel like we can find out anything we want to know. And so not that it's a bad thing to do that, but being able to practice a little self-restraint, have sort of a little bit of control over your emotions and think, okay, I need to find out more about this before I get enraged about what sounds like something outrageous. Sam Weinberg is my guy, and he recommends, and he's not the only one who recommends this, but he really recommends the process of lateral reading. And what that means is when you are looking at something that you need to evaluate, you don't necessarily look closely at that thing. He wants people to leave that website and open tabs and go to other websites and see what research they can do to find out the identity of that organization. And so that process of lateral reading asks the user to go outside the document itself, outside the site itself, and see what the rest of the world has to say about a certain organization. I really like that idea of lateral reading because it's a quick thing you can do. If you look at your Google results, you'll see a little, I think it's like 3 vertical dots in the upper right-hand corner of every result. Click on that because that will actually do the Googling for you. It shows you information, takes you to information about that particular site.
You just learned something.
I did
never
too.
looked at it.
I'm
going to look for that now.
For years, I ignored that. So yeah, try it out.
That's very cool. Okay, so we have Sam Weinberg. We have Spot the Troll, Odd One Out, which I'm absolutely going to go and look for next. We have taking English 1010s class, which is required, but a lot of students place out of English 1010s, so they might not get like a structured hour in the library with the librarian. Are there other things that students can do? So they could go and read Sam Weinberg, look at those websites, like podcasts, workshops, things that they can do to learn these skills a little bit more hands-on.
Well, any Tulane student has access to LibGuides, which are robust and tackle these kinds of issues. There is something called the CRAP test, which I didn't name, but it stands for CRAP, credibility, reliability, authority, and the purpose of the document, which is zingy because it's got an acronym and it walks you through the process there. It has, as all things do, some pros and cons. It can read as a kind of binary set of questions where you ask, is it current enough? Well, that seems like a yes or no question. And in fact, the answer might be far more complex than that. Current for this topic, given what you're trying to do with it. And so you've got to be on guard about oversimplifying something when you desperately want to oversimplify something because it makes it convenient and quicker, when in fact working through these kinds of questions is difficult and is a burden and is a bummer, but is necessary to lead a responsible life. Other ideas, Victoria?
I mean, kind of the old-fashioned answer to that question is look at Snopes or look at pro-con, or I mean, and again, like I think it's a lot to ask people to run up. It's a lot to ask Snopes. to do,
Yeah.
right? Like this is a nonprofit organization. It's not their job to seek out every falsehood on the internet and expose it. But it's a good place to start.
Yeah. Well, I would say, well, since you are not explicitly saying it, I am going to promote the workshops. Victoria does fabulous workshops, right? As do many of our colleagues here at Tulane University Libraries. And also for students who have managed to test out of English 1010, so you don't get that one-on-one library experience, we have librarians that we actually do like talking to students, so you can reach out to any one of us and do like a one-on-one. I call them consultations because I think it sounds fancy. Research consultations, and we could go over these basic skills too.
Yeah, and the Writing Center is the Writing
Right.
and Tutoring Center here on campus.
They're so
And
good.
it's probably worth your time to, if you're interested in these topics, to read an article called "Is Google Making Me Stupid?" Just to think about that question: Is Google making me stupid?
Oh, that's fabulous. We're going to link all of these resources in our little website that we're building out for this, so we'll have access to all of these. Do you guys have any like burning comments that you're like, oh, I wish I said that you want to share? And if not, that's totally fine. Really thinking.
There's more meat on the table, but that's for our listeners to pick up on and become scholars themselves and then end up on this podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your time and your knowledge so much. Thank you for
Thanks for
doing
having
this
us.
with us.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa.
No problem. All right, friends, you've been listening to Literacies, a 4-part audio series. What you just heard was a shorter excerpt from a much longer conversation. To listen to the whole conversation, read the transcript, learn more about today's guests, or check out any of the resources mentioned just now, visit our website, libguides.tulane.edu/literacies. This episode was recorded in Howard Tilton Memorial Library at Tulane University, using equipment available for anyone in the Tulane community to check out from Media Services, also in the library. Don't miss our next episode, where we'll be talking with KP May, Patrick Button, and Aaron Kulota about data literacy. This episode will drop at noon on Tuesday, February 11. Be sure you don't miss it. Follow Tulane University Library's YouTube channel and Instagram. Our host for Literacies is Lisa Hooper, our audio engineer and audio producer is Justin Green, and Alan Velasquez is our video producer.